Today's movie displays the courage and bravery needed to keep fighting, even after several failed attempts. Summary of the movie The Beads. This story is about a young lady, Ronti, who had to make several decisions in the bid to fight for her life after dying in her dream severally, having limited time to correct a mistake, otherwise she dies permanently. In details, the movie opens up with a scene where Ronti is being prayed for on her wedding day by her mother, Mrs. Williams, who showers her with the blessings of God, peace, fruitfulness, and faithfulness. After the blessing, she stood up on her feet, dancing. A few seconds later, she froze in shock. It seems she had recognized an image of horror from one of the guests seated in the crowd. She picked up a gun from the floor and shot herself in the head. The next scene opens up with flashback memories to when Ronti was younger. Ronti is hospitalized and she had to go through several medications, which she called experimental and trial drugs, due to an illness she had. According to her, the worst part was seeing her parents suffer because of her illness, and she would rather die than live another day. But her mother would not let her, because she would not be a good mother if she did. And she ensured that Ronti finished her experimental treatment, hoping that she would get better. Back to the present day, it seems Ronti had survived the illness. Ronti is all grown up now, staring at a family photo taken at the hospital during the time of her illness, and she puts it back behind her deodorant. Then she gets lost in thought, remembering when she smoked and injected hard drugs with one of her friends. She was brought back to reality when her mother screamed her name, "Ronti, your friends are here." Ronti, looking startled, mumbled, "Yes, mommy." It was the day of her bridal shower. She came downstairs to greet her friends, who hailed her by screaming and dancing, while saying Iyawo, which is Yoruba for a wife. They danced together, leaving Irene aside, who seemed to be rather disapproved by it, and Ronti's mom, Mrs. Williams, encouraged her not to let anyone change who she is. Moments later, Mr. Williams, Ronti's dad, walked into the living room, excited to see everyone. He greets his wife, Ronti's mom, and other female relatives around at the moment. It seemed he had just closed a deal or won something and was congratulated by his wife. Minutes later, Ronti came downstairs, greeted her dad, and took his suitcase, after confirming to her dad that her friends were upstairs. The women, Mrs. Williams, Adanna, Ruki, and Aisha, continued their chat after Mr. Williams made his way upstairs. They were all happy for Ronti until one of them, Buki, tried to confirm from Ronti's mom if Ronti had started drinking alcohol, and Ronti's mom and Adanna waved it off nicely, saying she now looks fresh and they give God all the glory because Ronti is now a changed person and the rehab had done a lot of good in her life. Moving on, the bride-to-be and her friends are having fun upstairs while Demola, Ronti's uncle, enters the sitting room, still occupied by the women. He greeted everyone and recognized his wife eating on the dining table, and they got into a light-hearted argument, and Mrs. Williams intervened. Next, we see Ronti's grandma, her mom, and the rest of the ladies in the family entering into her room. After a few pleasantries, the friends leave in order to make room for the women to carry out the family tradition of handing over a set of beads to the bride-to-be, a marriage gift for the goodness, joy, and peace of the bride in her matrimonial home. To them, the bead got rid of death and sickness. At first, Ronti disapproved of them, claiming they were diabolical. She later gave in to it after seeing that every woman standing with her wore one as well, and believed it worked. Afterwards, a collective declarative prayer was made by the women on Ronti. At a different home, we see a man named Mr. Obi. Mr. Obi was taking alcohol in his sitting room while his wife, with her packed up suitcase, was ready to leave his house and leave the marriage, claiming he had destroyed her life and there was nothing more he could do. She left the house crying, and her husband, Mr. Obi, continued drinking. It was already morning, the day of Ronti's wedding. Her friends admired her while she slept soundly. They said she needed her beauty sleep as it was her last day on the bed, so she might want to sleep longer than usual. She woke up and almost immediately, Ronti's mom walks into her room, excited, and asked her friends to get her ready so they won't be late for the big day. And Ronti reminded her mom that the makeup artist had not arrived yet, and one of her friends offered to call her. Shade, the housekeeper, walked into the room to wish Ronti well on her big day and ended up being reminded to go get breakfast ready. Next, we see at the dining table the women having a warm conversation but are interrupted by the entrance of Ronti's friend, who Adana adored, calling them morning babes. She asked them to decide which pair of shoes would suit Mrs. Williams' outfit better, and they chose the gold pair. And Adana persisted that Mrs. Williams gifted her the black pair. She was excited and was dancing for joy until she hit Ronti, who was coming down the staircase, to complain to her mom that a special day wasn't going the way she had planned. Breakfast wasn't ready, the makeup artist had not arrived yet, and other concerns as well. A little later, Ehi, Ronti's fiance, shows up in the sitting room, insisting to see Ronti, that it was very urgent, and it had to be before the wedding. While Ronti was being disturbed about the late arrival of her makeup artist upstairs, the women tried to stop Ehi from seeing his bride before the wedding, claiming it was a bad omen. In the midst of the whole pandemonium, Sade mistakenly spills hot tea on Ronti's thighs. On hearing her scream, her mom and grandma go up immediately to check on her. Her grandma consoled her while her mom went out to straighten Sade. The makeup artist finally arrived and she was asked to start immediately, leaving her excuses behind. He also makes his way to Ronti's bedroom after being permitted by her mom. On his arrival, her friends tried to stop him, also claiming it was a bad omen. Gracefully, her grandmother intervened and he was allowed to have the conversation with his fiancée, and he told her that his ex, Judith, would be attending their wedding. She was worried initially, but he assured her that she meant the world to him and nothing would ever change that. Next, we see that the traditional wedding ceremony had begun, where the women of the family danced out with joyous expressions, as well as the groom and his men on Abada. Minutes later, the groom Ehi was asked to prostrate thrice, first to the bride's mom and all the maternal side, next to the bride's dad and all the paternal side, and finally a general one for everyone. After all the activities, the bride came in with her ashwebi and were prayed for by her mom. A pandemonium occurred and Ronti was shot by an unknown guest, only to wake up on the other side of a water world. Hearing drum beats, she displays wonderful dance steps in the beat to enjoy herself. She woke up in the midst of her conversation with a man she met from that world. It seemed she was having a deja vu experience because all the activities as already seen in her dream were being replayed in reality. From Sade spilling tea on her, to the fall at the staircase, to Ehi seeing her, and so on. Ronti took her grandma to her bathroom in order to explain the occurring activities, and her inability to explain to her friends got them even more worried. It seemed like this deja vu experience kept on repeating itself severally. She kept on being shot by a strange man on a red Panama hat after being blessed by her parents. Her grandmother, who was worried, asked her to try and recognize the man's face so she could take it up from there. For every time she got shot, she died in the natural world and ends up on the other world by the waterside. And for every time wasted, the sky got darker. It showed she had little time to identify her proposed killer and stop him from shooting her. And since she had lived the same day over and over again, she tried to prevent certain occurrences from happening again, but they end up happening anyway. The tea could spill in a different location. In all the reoccurrences, she tried to find out who might want to hurt her for any reason. First, Judith, his ex, with the help of her friends, she cornered her and seized her passport, threatening that she would stay back in Nigeria if anything goes wrong at the wedding ceremony because she knew that Judith wasn't happy he was getting married to Ranti. After a brief chat with her grandmother, she conversed with her father to find out if he had issues with anyone, and she got to find out about a man named Mr. Obi who we met earlier and got further information from a case file. After finding out his daughter was killed in the collapse of one of the hostels built by her father. who was adamant about her worries. By the time the chaos became more serious, Ronti insisted on calling off the wedding because she tried speaking to Ehi, but he didn't believe her. As usual, after a conversation with her grandma, she felt better and decided to go ahead with the wedding. After being woken up from the same dream the fourth time, she finally captured the face of her killer and made a sketch of his picture and took it to her father, only to find out he was a rival whose daughter had died years ago after a hostel collapse. With her grandmother's advice, Sade's assistant, and that of her uncle Demola, she sneaked out of the house with her grandma to Mr. Obi's house, who appeared to be her killer. He wanted to kill her in the bid to carry out revenge on the family of Mr. Williams. After much deliberation, they both left the house scared. His wife pleaded with him not to kill Ronti on the spot. She decided to stay back with her husband so they could work things out. Back at Ronti's home, with fear and a trembling mind, Ronti still decided to go ahead with the wedding after being consoled and encouraged by her grandmother. This time it happened differently from the previous times because Mr. Obi had finally forgiven her and allowed her go ahead with the wedding after being consoled by his wife. Celebrations followed afterwards.